Ron, thanks so much for the chance to be here. Could you begin by introducing yourself?
Sure. I'm Ronald Ramsay. I'm superintendent of schools of SAD 37. I've been superintendent here for 11 years, but prior to that, I was principal at Harrington Elementary in the same district. I started there in 1993 through 2010, so I had a 17-year stint there. And prior to that, I was a chemistry physics teacher, science teacher at Narragansett High School for 10 years.
And also a graduate?
Also a graduate in Narragansett, class of 79. I came through this school system from kindergarten right through 12th grade.
This
Yep.
has been your home.
This has been my home. I affectionately tell people I've been in education since 1965. That was the year I started kindergarten, and haven't had a time off from it since then.
Before the MLTI began in 2002, what was the technology situation? What access was available?
We had very low access for technology in Harrington Elementary School. I would say we were just starting to emerge a little bit in playing with just a couple machines. I mean, we had a couple 286 type PC machines in the building, one in the library. For about the time of MLTI, we had just started to put together a computer lab. And those, I think, if I remember correctly, the vintage was just CD-ROM was just coming into play. So they would have been like 386, 486 machines with a CD-ROM. I remember vividly how excited I was to be able to get the encyclopedia on us.
Yeah.
And watch the the thing that people used to like to watch was the Hindenburg explosion. Yeah. And that kind of stuff. So it was a big advancement for us from not having anything like that, but nothing like it was when MLTI came in.
Yeah, we're down east. The rurality of this area, great strengths. But again, going back pre-MLTI, what impact did the rural nature, physically where we are, how did that impact kids' access to big ideas, aspirations, etc.?
I mean, we were pretty isolated. I mean, I think is the term. We have the brightest, smartest kids there are, just like everyone else does. But an awful lot of those students couldn't see beyond what they had right around them.
Yeah.
And MLTI opened the world to them.
Yeah.
In real time, which we'd never had before. I mean, you could actually start, and just to back up a little bit, we really had no infrastructure either. So I mean, we didn't have cities and towns that had already had like internet capabilities and places that kids could go to get access to
Right.
networks and networking. I mean, we had none of that.
Well, and even museums.
No, right.
Certainly local history, I'm sure.
Yeah, we had a few small local libraries that
Yeah.
had a little bit of local history in them. Even in those years, the libraries hadn't put computers in them yet.
Yeah.
I mean, so there was no place to go access technology.
And those libraries would have been volunteer run.
Volunteer run, open a couple days a week.
Yeah.
I mean, my local library is open Wednesday afternoon and Saturday morning.
Yeah.
That's the total
That's the
extent of
reality.
it, even to this day.
Yeah.
And that's the reality. So we were very technologically isolated as well as geographically
Yeah.
isolated.
The MLTI appears
Yep.
in 2002. Seventh grade receives the devices in 2002, 2003, the eighth grade. We found out during those years and that the building principal is a key player in helping define the culture of the building in terms of the relationship between students, teachers and the technology. As building principal, what steps did you take to encourage use of the MLTI?
Well, first of all, in my career, I've had a couple things that's come about that I immediately said, oh my God, we've just got to jump on board with this both feet in.
Mm-hmm.
And this was one of them. To me, it was such a almost gift from God, so to speak, that how could you possibly not embrace it and go full force into it? So all my teachers knew that I supported it 100%, and I supported it by encouraging them and engaging in the project as much as I could with getting professional development for us to come in and have people, real live people that were a step ahead of us, come in and help us integrate it within our classrooms. I mean, we didn't want it to be another computer lab. I mean, we wanted it to be something that those seventh graders initially could just be an extension of themselves. And it quickly became that. We also allowed the kids, as was encouraged, but we allowed the kids to take the machines home. We wanted them to show them to the parents, get the parents involved. We immediately started trying to integrate them into the whole school day as much as possible. And I hope I modeled that.
Well, I've got to say, and in full disclosure, I had the opportunity to support Harrington Elementary in some professional development efforts over those early years, and had gotten to know the faculty to some degree and the district prior to that. But one of the things that I saw consistently, and I have been in many schools, but what I saw was you'd walk in, you'd drop in the classroom, you'd look over a kid's shoulder, you'd ask questions. Did you ever learn from the kids?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think I was just as curious as any of the kids were, first of all, so that made it easy. I mean, I wanted to engage in that technology as well, and did, and I wanted to learn from wherever I could, and I learned a tremendous amount from my kids. I was also fortunate enough to have 3 of my own children come up through the MLTI system. My oldest boy, Drew, was in the first group, and he was just learning tremendously from it. So I had to be encouraged by that, seeing it within my own son, knowing that that same impact was happening to all the 7th graders we had in the district. I really felt was going to leapfrog them ahead, and I think it did. And I also really can't help but think, where would we be today if we hadn't had that? Because I know where we would be as a district. We did not have the economic resources to have done that. And even if we had, I also am not confident that we would have prioritized them in such a way, because we have so many other big looming needs. If the state of Maine hadn't done that for us, we would not have had it.
Mm-hmm.
We would have continued down a computer lab methodology for who knows how long.
Mm-hmm.
Today in this district, we've had one-to-one computing right from kindergarten through 12th grade for many years now. I'm not saying we were the first in the state, because we don't have the resources in some places.
But you've made it happen.
We've made it happen, and we were surely ahead of a lot of our peers in making that happen, because we saw the great benefit.
And that's what it goes to. Made it happen for a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
The purpose is not simply to be able to say all of our kids are one-to-one, but it is to open those doors to see impact on student learning. You mentioned your son Drew was in that first year. Did you hear or observe as a parent, as a both principal and parent, which could be a tough line to walk,
right.
I'm sure, did it make a difference that it was one-to-one, that device was his, as opposed to he had plenty of time in a computer lab?
I think it made a tremendous difference. Now,
what did you see?
Now, of course, it's hard to know what the road untraveled would have been.
Sure.
Right? Because he was in that first group. But I saw a tremendous change in him academically and even with confidence in those right in that time frame, 7th grade, 8th grade, right through high school. I saw him, really achieving things that I'm not so sure that he maybe thought he could have prior to that engagement with the MLTI, and I saw his confidence really go up. In a way that by the time he was through 8th grade, I had the feeling that he could do anything he wanted to do. And I can even remember saying to my wife, he can go places if he chooses.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, it still comes down to student's choice.
Sure.
and wanting to do those kinds of things. But he never would have got that in a computer lab. I mean, he was doing projects on a regular basis in all of his subjects, probably pretty much everything except maybe spelling, which I'm not sure that they didn't use it in there as well. But his his social studies, history classes, his science classes,
Yeah.
His language classes, reading, writing, publishing, writing stories, creating books.
Yeah.
That's all stuff that would not have happened.
So at the risk of inciting the proud dad component, can you follow Drew's story through? He graduates from Narraguagas?
Yep, he graduates from Narraguagas High School. He goes to University of New England. He was salutatorian of his class at Narraguagas, and he really had pick of anywhere he wanted to go, including Harvard. And he visited University of New England, fell in love with it, knew that they had a medical program there, thought he wanted to be a PA, a physician's assistant, which was a wonderful vocation. When he went there, within the first year, his professors told him that they thought he ought to pursue becoming a medical doctor. Within his first year, he was a teaching assistant for calculus and organic chemistry as a freshman, because as a freshman he was really a sophomore because he had so many credits going in that he'd taken in high school. And at the end of his 4 years, he applied for University of New England's medical school and was accepted the minute he applied. Decided not to apply anywhere else because he knew he wanted to go there. Now all these years later, after doing that for 4 years and a residency for 3, he's a medical doctor and working and practicing in Millbridge, Maine, which is within our district. And he replaced his primary physician, the guy that was our doctor my doctor for the last 40 years, told my son Drew a couple years ago that if he would come back here and practice, he would retire and let him take over his practice.
Huh.
And that's just exactly what happened.
Wow.
And he retired, and my son came in, and he's been practicing there for a year now.
Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
I mean, and obviously we are very proud, but I'm proud of all 3 of my children. They've all done well.
Well, and proud of your family, and that's a
Yes.
unique story into which you have insight as only a parent can. But you saw that kind of impact across the district.
Yes.
There are other stories. What's the community's acceptance of the role of technology in education?
The acceptance is very high, and I'd also say the support's very high. I mean, so with the success of the MLTI project, I would say that success transferred into us being able to leverage and purchase, to eventually get to one-to-one computing. I mean, our school board.
The community has to vote on it. They pass the budget.
They have to pass the budget.
And
our school
hold it,
board,
not just one community.
Yes. Well, yes, and our school board before that has to say, this is what we're going to prioritize. This is where we're going to put our money. We put, we're a small school district, so this might not sound like a lot of money, but we put $50,000 a year in a line for just that purpose. For whatever amount of years, I'd have to go back and look to see how many years it took to be able to pull that off. But and we still continue to carry that line, knowing that we've got to continually update and upgrade and make improvements, and some of it's with purchases and some of it's with leases, all that, but we have it, and actually we have way more than one to one.
Yeah.
If you add every machine up, we've got way more than one for everybody.
The technology has become a foundational, just as you budget for heat, for fuel oil, for
Correct. Yeah.
it is just part of it. Your director of technology
Mhm.
in the district,
Yes. Ron
came out,
Smith.
Ron Smith,
Yep.
came out of the classroom.
Came out
Again,
of the
I
classroom.
got to
Seventh
know.
junior high teacher, Cherryfield.
Got
Yep.
to know Ron again during those early professional development days. He had a great interest, and delved not only into the pedagogical purposes of the technology, but he also enjoyed getting to know the machine and
Mhm.
how it worked and problem solving. Why, in your perspective as superintendent, the value of having somebody who's evolved from classroom teacher to director of technology, where's the value?
Well, there's great value in that. I mean, first of all, I would say that he was similar to a lot of us in those early years. He really wanted to ride that wave of the MLTI project, and that just naturally transferred for us and for him into becoming a technology director. So he was totally self-taught. I mean, he truly was a classroom teacher that had an interest in integrating technology with education. Good classroom teacher who probably in his early years didn't use technology hardly at all. And so he had the opportunity to become part of that MLTI project, just like the rest of us did when it first started, and fully embraced it and self-taught himself, really. I shouldn't say that. I mean, we had a lot of good professional development along the way,
Right.
but then from that, he progressed with it. I mean, he proceeded to learn about the machines as well as the integration. So I think it's very important to have someone that came up, if at all possible, to have someone that come up that way, because he is foremost in his thinking is, how are you going to use this in the classroom, and what impact and how important it's going to be. I mean, I use analogies a fair amount, and this is probably a poor one, but we put in the read and recovery program probably 30 years ago in this district, and as you know, read and recovery helps kids learn to read. And
Sure.
I've always said that what they do with it's up to them, meaning the student. But by God, if we can help it, they're going to know how to read.
Yeah.
And I liken the MLTI project a lot to that. What they do with this integration and understanding the technology later on in life is up to them.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want to be the one responsible for them not having those tools.
Mm.
And if at all possible, we want to put them in the best footing they can be on. And in today's world, that heavily includes technology.
Mm-hmm.
We have students that, as go out into the world in various different things, but I have yet to hear one come back and say, boy, I wish I had known how to do this, because I think they go into whatever setting they're going to go in, and I'll go back and use an example of my children, but none of them have ever said to me, I didn't know how to do that when they got to college or when they got to graduate school, or,
They brought both academic knowledge and skills and the technical skills, which now are a part of the way the world works.
Yes, and they are a limiting factor or a limiting tool if you don't have them.
Right.
Just like the academic skills are.
Right.
I mean, if you cannot do algebra, chances are you're not going to succeed in calculus.
Right.
And those technological skills are just as important.
Yeah.
And if you can't do Google Classroom, say, right now in the world we live in,
Yeah.
and you're not somewhat proficient in it, I mean, everybody probably has an entry level ability.
Well,
but-
it's not specifically Google Classroom,
No,
but if you can't operate and contribute effectively in a online environment where you are
Better
independently,
stated,
where
yes.
there's not a manager standing behind you
That's right.
in the physical world,
Yeah. And-
good luck.
And as I always saying earlier, we successfully transitioned into remote learning almost overnight in this district.
Just coming out of the pandemic now,
Yes.
March 14th, the world changed, and
we closed school on a Friday. Friday was our last day. We didn't realize we was closing it until midway through the weekend, and by Monday, we had a plan to go remote, and I think by Tuesday or Wednesday we implemented it, as did a lot of schools, but we implemented it pretty much hitting the ground running. I mean, there was very little, very little bugs to work out of it, because our teachers had already been doing big components of that and had been doing it for a long, long time.
and the kids, it was to some degree how it was a
Business
foundational
as usual.
part of business as usual.
Yeah.
That's the way school happens
Yes.
here.
Yeah.
The MLTI, the way I've been describing it in these conversations, is that it was an innovation of the first degree. The educational ground shifted with that arrival. Forever, and isn't going back.
No.
There will be other innovations that will come along.
Mhm.
What advice, as a building principal, as a now superintendent, as a classroom teacher, as a parent, what advice would you give to school communities for the next time an innovation of that degree comes along?
Jump in both feet would be my advice. I mean, I would like to think we did to a certain extent, but we could always do it more. I mean, we had people reluctant. We had people holding back. I mean, I'm a born cynic myself in terms of, I guess that's the scientist in me in wanting to question and understand better before you're willing to step forward. But if you feel it in your heart that you know that it's going to be right for kids, embrace it. And I believe, I'm going to retire someday in the future, and I would like to look back on my own career and say that's something really good that we did for the students at SAD 37, because we could have opted in, but not fully participated, which I'm sure there's places that did. We wouldn't be where we're at right now if we'd done that. And we needed to opt in, realizing, as I said earlier, it was a gift. And it was a gift that you didn't want to refuse. The idea of doing this and all the politicalness of it that was happening at the time, you had to be able to see through that and see the benefit, and say to yourself, I don't know if it's the right thing to do or not. I don't know if it's the right way for the state to spend the money. That's not my decision. What my decision is we're going to get this, and we need to make the absolute best of it that we can. A lot of times I think people get too hung up in the weeds on the stuff that they can't control. What we could control is we could control how we used what we were being given and how we embraced it, and as we said earlier, the modeling of it, the projects that we would do. I mean, I can't even remember some of the things in the early years, but we even set up contests amongst the kids and projects and things, that would jazz it up and make it more exciting. And when someone would go home and make a movie, I mean, we wanted to see it. We wanted to, we wanted to display it to the classroom. We wanted to publish it in some way. All that stuff aided to the total success. We let the kids take the machines home immediately. I mean, a lot of places were reluctant to do that. We were too. I mean, we was afraid. I mean, our worst thing was, they're going to come back broken. What we found out is they took incredibly good care of them because we made them meaningful to them, and they became meaningful to them. They didn't want to destroy it no more than you wanted to destroy the first car you ever had. right? I mean, you needed it for transportation.
Well, you needed it for several things.
Well,
It had changed your life in multiple ways.
Right, and these machines were similar in the sense that, you know, why would a kid, now did we have a few mishaps?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sure.
We even had people that lost them, a couple that lost them and you know, a couple months later found them again because the house was in such disarray, you know, that
Yeah.
you could lose a computer actually in it.
Yeah.
You know, those kinds of things were bound to happen, but you gotta look past all that.
Yeah.
And see that the overall good was far outweighing the
Hmm.
very small instances that we had of maybe inappropriate use or whatnot.
You know, the simplicity of your recommendation to, is it good for the kids?
Yeah.
And once you see that, jump in.
Jump in. I would love to see what that next innovation will be. I hope I'm still around to see it, because that's the kind of stuff. I mean, it's like there's a term that I'm sure you're familiar with, the leapfrog effect. I mean, the MLTI project was absolutely a leapfrog effect for this district.
Yeah.
It bypassed and jumped over probably 5, 6, 7, 8 other steps we would have naturally taken if left on our own. We never would have just said, hey, we're going to buy these machines for 2 grades, and then not very long after that, I mean, I didn't mention this but not very long after that, move it up to the high school. I mean, our initial plan was once those 7th graders hit 9th grade, we didn't want to say, okay, you no longer have a machine, so we purchased the machines for 9 through 12 as well. So within, I guess that'd be year 3, within a 3-year period, we'd gone from having none, pretty much, to having them from 7 through 12.
Yeah.
And also all the teachers involved in that as well.
Yeah.
Which was just as important, if not more important, you know,
The continuity.
Yeah.
It had become part. Well, Ron, it is such a, as I said, a profoundly simple statement to see if it's good for kids, and when you see that it is, jump in. But your role, which I observed firsthand over years as building principal, and certainly now as superintendent, it's so clear that you not only believe that, but you act on it all the time.
Well, I thank you for that, because you know, sometimes we never know how we'll be recognized
Right.
Throughout a career, but you know, if someday, if the old kind of epitaph statement kind of thing, if that's what you could be remembered for, that would please me. That's all I'd need.
Making sure it's good for the kids.
Yeah, and caring enough about their future, because I really do believe, and I think this is true everywhere, but it's definitely true here in rural Washington County. Education is their hope of the future. It's their way to make a better life for themselves. And not that we don't have wonderful lives here, but we also have an awful lot of poverty, an awful lot of isolationism, an awful lot of feeling like you're set apart from the rest of the world, and if not the rest of the state. And this is a big part of bridging that gap. And I think it has been a big part. I mean, it is shown that it has been.
Yeah.
And it's not going to get any less. It's only going to get more, and it's only going to help our students more the more we're able to do that.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you for your time, and thank you for all you've done and are doing.
Oh, you're more than welcome. Thank you, Jim.